So welcome to Chef Pesci's lecture. Today we're going to cover the ServSafe Chapter 1, but throughout this week we're going to cover all the chapters of ServSafe. It's relatively going to be the same information that you're going to need for National Registry. National Registry is just a completely different organization with a completely different format to the test. ServSafe is the premier. It's most recognized out in the industry. But whether you have ServSafe or National Registry or the two, you will be golden. So let's talk about what a foodborne illness outbreak is, okay? It's three different things. A, two or more people have the same symptoms after eating the same food. They get sick, they go to the hospital, and it's confirmed through laboratory analysis, whether they do a stool sample or blood results or the both. It's confirmed through laboratory analysis that there is something going on at the restaurant. So they contact the regulatory authorities. The health department comes out, they do an inspection, and they investigate to see what's going on. The problem with foodborne illness, and when there's two or more people, if you look back when Chipotle was in the news, they had infected now this is an estimate, between 600 to 800 people. By the time they caught it, that's how many people had gotten sick. Okay. Same with COVID. When COVID first broke, right? I was in South Florida, and I remember exactly seeing on the news that there were 4,000 confirmed cases. If it only takes two or more people to get sick after eating the same food, imagine, and they find out that there are over hundreds of people that got sick. Imagine what 4,000 would have looked like, right? Today, COVID has infected hundreds of thousands, if not more, of people. Okay? So, the answer is all the above. An illness is considered an outbreak when two or more people have the same symptoms after eating the same food. An investigation is conducted by the state and local regulatory authorities, which is your health department. And the outbreak has been confirmed by laboratory analysis. What are the challenges that companies face, right? Time is money. So food service operations work hard to minimize foodborne illnesses. As the result of these efforts, foodborne illnesses have declined in recent years. However, operations still face many challenges to food safety. Pressure to work quickly can make it hard to take the time to follow food safety practices. We know that here at Seminole because we're on non-block schedule, so we're on 48-minute classes, and we're playing that time clock. So we feel pressured. We can't practice food safety like we should be practicing it because time is of the essence. Your staff may speak different language than you do, which can make it difficult to communicate. Cultural differences can also influence how food handlers view food safety. Staff often have difficult levels of education, making it more challenging to teach them food safety. Everyone's on a different level. Some people work front of the house, some people work back of the house. Some people work around food, some don't work around the food. Okay? Illness-causing microorganisms are more frequently found on food that once was considered safe. Food that is received from suppliers that are not practicing food safety can cause foodborne illness outbreaks. It's why we have to purchase from approved sources, not unapproved sources. The number of customers at high risks for getting a foodborne illness is increasing, right? High-risk populations, elderly, we're going to talk about that coming up in the next couple slides. But high-risk populations have a high-risk chance of getting sick versus having a normal person who eats the same food, right? Because their immune system is working against them. An example of high-risk population would be elderly population. We learned that with COVID. What did COVID kill most of? It killed off the elderly. So some challenges that companies will face is training new staff, okay? Constantly having to retrain. And the hospitality industry has the highest turnover rate when it comes to job stability. So they're constantly having to retrain. But the ServSafe program will provide the tools needed to overcome the challenges in managing a good food safety program. And that's what we're going to discuss through these chapters. Foodborne illness costs the United States billions of dollars each year. National Restaurant Association figures show that one foodborne illness outbreak can cost an operation thousands of dollars. It can even result in closure. Some of the business costs were highlighted in the video. If we showed you the video, well, then you'll be able to take away what those costs are. There are also human costs, which are identified on this slide. Okay? So, on average, about 128,000 people are hospitalized every single year due to a foodborne illness, and about 3,000 to 4,000 of them die. That's how serious this is. Now, you may be sitting here saying things like, well, Chef, that's really like less than 1% of the population. But imagine what they were saying. If they're saying it and you were saying it, you could get sick. You could have long-term disability because of it, or you could die. And with the growing amounts of medical costs and how expensive it is to be in a hospital, if you don't have insurance, you're stuck with a bill, all because you went out to eat and got sick. Okay? So, unsafe food is usually the result of a contamination, the presence of harmful substances in food. There's 3 ways food becomes contaminated. Before we talk about those 3 ways, to prevent foodborne illness, you must recognize the contaminations that can make food unsafe. These come from pathogens, chemicals, or physical objects. Pathogens being biological. They might also come from certain unsafe practices in your operation. Okay? We're going to discuss this a little bit more in depth in Chapter 2. But biological, not washing your hands properly, picking up the bacteria from wiping yourself, okay, and then not properly scrubbing your hands and going back to the food service industry. Touching food, that's cross-contamination. Chemical, a couple examples with chemical could be we spray our counters, and the mist particles travel and they touch food. Or we spray our surfaces and we don't properly clean them, which we're going to discover more in the up-and-coming slides. And then physical hazards. Why are Band-Aids in the industry blue and not beige, like you find out at like a Publix or a Walmart? It's because if a Band-Aid falls off, which it does happen from time to time, or a finger cut, blue, if it falls off, they want you to be able to notice it and find it before serving a customer. So, we must always purchase food from approved sources. Okay, completely takes the risk factor out of the potential of a foodborne illness. The other risk factors for foodborne illness are related to 4 main practices. Time temperature abuse, okay, not properly holding our food at proper correct temperatures, which again we will discuss more in depth in another chapter. Not cooking our food to proper temperatures. Cross-contamination, right? When we contaminate raw with cooked, the transfer of bacteria from one surface to another. Poor personal hygiene. We're not talking poor personal hygiene from the customer standpoint, but from the person preparing the food, the employee. Right? We touch our face quite often, and sometimes we don't even know we're doing it. Or we wash our hands correctly and then we don't have anywhere to dry our hands and we wipe them on our chef coat or our apron or our clothes and we just picked up bacteria. One thing you need to know about bacteria is that you can't see, smell, or taste bacteria. So that's where it becomes very dangerous. And then poor cleaning and sanitizing. We need to make sure we are properly, just like we are wash, rinse, and sanitizing and air drying our dishes, we need to make sure we wash, rinse, sanitize, and air dry our surfaces frequently, okay? Technically, by state law, we have to have a green bucket and a red bucket with a designated towel in each at our lab stations. That's why on your lab sheets, I always tell you guys to make sure you have those two things, okay? If you just sanitize the counters, then it's like just grabbing hand sanitizer without washing your hands. It's not effective. But when we wash, rinse, and sanitize, just like we do with our hands and our dishes, it becomes effective. Hand sanitizer should never be used as a substitute for hand washing. And we'll talk about that more in depth in the hand washing chapter. So, is it okay for food service operation to use food prepared in a private home? The answer is no. Why? Food prepared in a private home is considered to be from an unsafe source. And it must absolutely be avoided. Keep in mind that food prepared in a private home is considered to be from an unsafe source. And you must avoid it. Okay? We don't know what they're doing. We don't know if they're licensed. We don't know if they're registered with the health department and they have their inspections. So we got to make sure we purchase food only from approved sources. Pathogens can spread to food if equipment has not been cleaned and sanitized correctly between uses. This can happen in ways indicated on this slide. So we got equipment, utensils are not washed, rinsed, sanitized between uses. Sanitize. How often do I see that happening on labs? On lab days where we're just washing or wiping our counters, but we're not properly washing, rinsing, and sanitizing them? That one move right there can really save on potentially cross-contaminating with another surface, well, with another product, and then that making you get sick. Wiping cloths are not stored. Wiping cloths, are not stored in a sanitizing solution between uses. And sanitizing solution are not at required levels. When Kurt showed up at our last inspection, Kurt Jennings, he's our health inspector, he actually took one of our test strips, went over to the 3-compartment sink, agitated the test strip in the sanitizing water to make sure it was at proper dosages, and it is. A few years ago, we invested in a system that properly measures out the concentration to water ratios so that your soap is at proper levels and your sanitizer is at proper levels. Because if it's over those proper levels, that's when you have a chemical hazard, and that's where you can get sick. So on slide 1.14, what is going on in this picture? It's very hard to tell what's going on, but if you take a look, we got poor personal hygiene. The answer is C, because sneezing or coughing on food can contaminate it. That's common sense. Now, all of you, if you know Chef Hess, he has a famous mantra that he says, common sense isn't so common. Let me fill you in, ladies and gentlemen, on the most important thing you need to know about passing National Registry or ServSafe. It comes down to practicing common sense. But in today's world, common sense, as according to Chef Hess, and I would agree with this, common sense is not common. Okay? These habits are considered poor personal hygiene habits. What's going on in this picture? 1.15. Easy. Cross-contamination, right? We have lettuce. Lettuce is prepared food, right? It doesn't need any further cooking for you to consume it. It should be sitting on the top shelf. And we're going to talk more in depth on how to properly shelve your product in the refrigerator or freezers so that you prevent stuff like this from occurring. Blood from the raw meat stored above the lettuce has been cross-contaminated with it. A foodborne illness can occur at any time contaminated food touches or drips fluids onto cooked or ready-to-eat food. This is called cross-contamination. What's going on in this picture? Well, he's probing. He's wearing gloves, so let's take a look. He's wearing gloves. He's probing in the thickest part of the chicken, but the chicken is not at proper temperature. It's at 115. Chicken's supposed to be cooked at 165, and it must hold that temperature for a minimum of 15 seconds for it to be considered safe. So the answer is A. The chicken has not been cooked to a temperature high enough to kill pathogens. At this point, it has been time temperature abused and could cause a foodborne illness if served. Key word, could. Depends on the person. Depends on their immune system. Is their immune system strong enough to fight off bacteria? You'll never know. What's going on here? Okay, he's wiping a table with a single-use towel. The answer is D. The employee appears to only be wiping the prep table clean rather than washing, rinsing, and sanitizing it. This would be considered poor cleaning and sanitizing and could result in a foodborne illness. So, of all these illnesses and the ways that you can get sick through contaminated food, which population has the higher risk? There's three of them. We have elderly people, preschool-aged children. Their immune systems are still developing, and people with compromised immune system. People that are suffering from cancer or receiving chemotherapy, have HIV, AIDS, are going through transplants. Okay? The immune system is the body's defense against illness. Elderly people are at high risk because their immune system have weakened with age. Very young children are at high risk because they have not built up strong immune systems. And people with a compromised immune system, certain medical conditions and or medications can weaken a person's immune system. I don't know about you, but growing up most of my life, I heard that your immune system is the most important thing. And if you don't take care of it at a young age, you're going to have immune system issues in the future. And that's what can get you sick. So, how do we keep food safe? We focus on these 5 bulletins. Controlling the time and temperature, properly holding our food, properly taking the correct temperatures. Okay? Preventing cross-contamination. Making sure we're wiping down our surfaces properly, right? Cleaning and sanitizing, that last one there. Making sure that we store our food properly in the shelving in a refrigerator or freezer. Practicing good personal hygiene. Making sure we show up to work wearing fresh, cleaned uniforms. Not something that we wore 2 days ago, or 3 days ago, or a week ago. Making sure that we pull our hair back. Making sure that we're taking showers. We're washing our hands when we get to work, when we leave the bathroom. Making sure that we purchase from approved, reputable suppliers, people that are licensed, people that are inspected by the state. Those are approved sources. And of course, the last one we just talked about, cleaning and sanitizing. 1.20. As a manager, your job is more than just understanding food safety practices and creating necessary procedures. You must also train your staff to follow these procedures. Staff should be trained when they are first hired and on an ongoing basis. Your entire staff needs general food safety knowledge, and that's what we do. I know we talk about it a lot, and we will always talk about it. It will always be the premise of these classes, whether you're in culinary 1, 2, or 3. The goal is to give you the foundation in level 1, get you to level 2, and then get you certified with ServSafe by level 3. Other knowledge will be specific to the tasks performed on the job. For example, everyone needs to know the correct way to wash their hands. However, only receiving staff need to know how to inspect produce during receiving. Staff need to be retrained in food safety regularly. This is not just something we do once. I know out in the industry, sometimes things just get busy, they train you, and then they just expect you to know it. But here, and in culinary school, we're kind of constantly reiterate why it's important to practice food safety. 1.21, when a food handler completes food safety training, we must document it. Once staff are trained, we must monitor them to make sure they're following the procedures. We must set the standards high and make sure that our staff are following those procedures. And if they're doing it incorrectly, which could lead to the increase in risk, when this happens, it is important to correct the situation immediately. This is called corrective action. If an employee often completes a task incorrectly, or if multiple employees complete a task incorrectly, they should be retrained. Staff aren't the only ones who need to keep food safe or who need to be trained on food safety. The FDA Food Code, Food Drug Administration, requires that persons in charge of a food service operation must become certified food protection managers. Ms. Wiley, Chef Pesci, and Chef Hess, we carry the Food Protection Manager certification. We're required to have it. And we must have someone with that certification on site at all times during the operation. Same goes for food service. Normally you have 3 shifts. You have an AM, a mid, and a PM shift. You need to at least have 2 people with food safety or food service protection manager certification, which is what you get through ServSafe, and we'll get you there by level 3. But for all argument's sake, we're focusing on National Registry right now. For some type of operations, the person in charge may need to be on site at all times. This is the case if regulatory authority has decided that the operation poses minimal risk for causing a foodborne illness. That decision would be based on the kind of operation it is and the type of food that's being served or sold. Cashier-less markets and convenience stores are good examples of operations where the person in charge may need to be on site at all times. The person in charge must also be able to show that they have the required knowledge. To become a certified food protection manager, you must pass a test from an accredited program. We teach that accredited program. And then we pay, culinary pays, not Chef Hess, not Chef Pesci, but the money sitting in our internal accounts pays for each of you to have the opportunity to take that test. Otherwise, if you wait until after you graduate high school, you'll be paying about $120, $135, and you must sit in a food safety class for at least 16 hours. Think about that for a second. Get it done now so you don't have to do it later. Get it done now so we pay for it, not you, and you don't have to pay for it later. So the only thing I need you to really take away for Chapter 1 is to understand the basis of food safety, which we have discussed in all those slides so far. But the most important key thing I need you to take away that will appear on National Registry or ServSafe is that the tests will only include the abbreviated words to each organization. So you need to know who the CDC is and what they do, who the FDA is and what they do. So Centers for Disease Control, we should know that with COVID. FDA, Food Drug Administration. What does the Food Drug Administration do? Take a second, read those bulletins. Slide .27. USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. And then Public Health Service. That's going to be your local health departments. Okay? They conduct their research into causes of foodborne illness outbreaks, and assist in investigating outbreaks. So state, local regulatory authorities, they write, they adopt the codes, and they regulate retail and food service operations. Food safety responsibilities include inspecting the operation, enforcing the regulations, investigating complaints and illnesses, and issuing licenses and permits. That is key. Licensing and permits will pop up on the exam. So that means highlight that or get that down written on your paper. And that's it. That's chapter 1 in a nutshell.